Thanks, Johnny, for setting the tone for a high energy weekend. Tonight, we have the privilege of being in the presence of a true visionary and leader in the field of gender equity in Canadian sport. Our guest speaker embodies the essence of strong leadership, having dedicated her career to breaking barriers, promoting inclusivity, addressing gender equity challenges, and implementing solutions within the realm of Canadian sport. Dr. Anne Pegoraro, the Lang Chair in Sport Management in the Gordon S. Lang School of Business and Economics from the University of Guelph, has successfully spearheaded several projects to have had a profound impact on sport in Canada. Under her leadership as co-director of E-Alliance, Dr. Pegoraro continues to lead initiatives focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion, ensuring they remain a top priority. Dr. Anne will be sharing her insights on the business of sports through the lens of gender equity. Prepare to be inspired, challenged, and empowered to act. Please join me in giving Dr. Anne a warm welcome.
So I usually do this for a living, and I kind of usually stand at a side so I can see people. But there's a really bright light. So if I'm squinting, it's not, don't take it personally. So thanks everyone for coming tonight. It's going to be a rapid show. I freaked Tom out earlier when he saw that I have 129 slides, lots of pictures. But it is a bit participatory, and then hopefully we'll dig into some of the things I share a lot more with the power panel that's coming afterwards, which is a great group of people. So when I started thinking about this, I started thinking about this in the way that a professor would, right? What are we going to look at in terms of what are the components of the business of soccer or the business of sport? And so my first one is about participation, right? So it's our participants, our coaches, our administrators, our officials. They're a big part of this puzzle. Whoops. And then the next part is what's the commercial value of what we do in sport? And so what's happening in media, what's happening in terms of deals that people make. Gotta figure out how to get this to work. There we go. All right, maybe I have to stand closer. And the last part is sort of this foundation that underpins all of it, and how do we keep increasing what's happening in that? And then I thought to myself, there are events that are coming that actually can accelerate this. So, I call it PIE. It's professionalism, idea, inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility, and big events that are coming in soccer for us. And so I looked at this and I said, great, it's an equation. It looks very linear, but really these are very interactive parts. And so to me, the model looks a little bit more like this. And there are actually different cogs that work together, and each one of these accelerator events will move these. And the best thing we want to do is have them all moving as fast as they can, right? And so we have to think about how do we get more people playing the game from the grassroots all the way up? How do we increase and improve the performance that's happening on the pitch? And I think that's going to be Nick tomorrow, and a little bit of Tracy the next day. How do we look at building more commercial value for the game so that we can have more resources to do that? And then when we think about our foundation, how do we improve the governance and the facilities and the standards inside the game? How do we increase resources? Because that drives a lot of what we do. And then in turn, that brings us back into more viable opportunities for participants and feeds back into the model. And then on the outside, we have these things that are going to drive that. How do we use diversity and inclusion as a business strategy? We'll talk about that. How do we look at big events that are coming? How can we take advantage of that from the grassroots all the way up in soccer? And then how do we keep working on building our governance standards and improving our game? So let's talk a little bit about what we know where we are in participation inside our game. So we know that we have player pathways. There's lots of them. I took a little look around the country, inside Ontario, and said, look, everybody's got player pathways. We figured out a way to get people to play soccer for life, to get to the top of the list, and to keep going through and through and through. So we've got designs for the game. We've got ways to bring people in at different points. And then what does it really look like in terms of numbers, right? So in numbers, we have a breakdown of youth and senior players from Canada Soccer's annual report, and a recent report that told us soccer is actually the #1 sport that everybody in this country, youth-wise, wants to play. So we have demand. We know we have some people playing it. And this is Ontario Soccer's participation data. So we know that people have come back. Pre-pandemic, post-pandemic, the line is where we were before. We're actually above it. We're starting to get more people interested in the game, and we're at about 100 and some % of what our earlier participation rates were. I dug into some data that came from MLSE, great Ontario-based study called Change the Game. And this is about 2,400 people that chose soccer as #1 sport in Ontario. What do we know about them? Seems to be really interesting. We've got similar breakdowns, whether they're Canadian-born, not Canadian-born, a little bit similar by gender, different in ages. The 11 to 14s for girls was more popular, 6 to 10 for boys. If it's not the #1 sport choice from an ethnic group, it's the #2 sport choice. So we have a lot of interest and a real good set of data here. You're going to see some more from this throughout the presentation. We also know that what we do in this sport has a role in playing the performance on the pitch, right? So thanks to Johnny and his team, we know that we looked at when does the OPDL come in and long-term player pathways. What does that impact have in Ontario's role in the game on the national team? So here's what it's done for women over years. Here's what it's done for men on the national team. So we know that things that we're doing are actually changing the trajectory of where players who are on the elite path can go in our sport. So what are we having success on the pitch? We have a very successful women's national team. We've won some medals. We've done really well. We qualify all the time. We're going to be in Paris this summer. Our men's team did something they hadn't done in how many years? 36, right? I had to look back there. And that's changed a lot of how people are looking at soccer. We're going to learn a little bit more about how that plays out. We have teams playing, and succeeding in national championships. We have a new championship process coming this summer. So we're building and we have success on the pitch as well. So what do we know about coaches? Let's talk a little bit. So the research we did, we looked at some volunteers. What do we know about volunteers in a sport in Canada? We know some interesting things. 65% of them are women. 97% of them have children or live with children. If they volunteer in sports in general, they're usually highly educated. They usually work full time. They're predominantly white from our study. So these are the things we know about them. The other study here is from the Coaches Association of Ontario saying, here's how people break down that are coaching inside of all sport in Ontario. And you see the vast majority of them are volunteers, right? So it's important to know who our volunteers are. What do we know about them? How do we keep them engaging with the game? Because they're a real important part of it. Really probably need to be closer. What do we know about coaches across the country? So from Canada Soccer, again, we know we're almost at about 7.5% are women, which is better than the global average, which is 5%. So we're doing some things good. Of course, for my world, that needs to be 50%. So we have to get there. We know we have over 19,000 people coaching in Ontario. Many of you are in the room. You play a big role in this. And we know that still predominantly mostly men who are doing this, but we do see some intersectional identities and gender starting to grow in terms of coaching in Ontario. We have coaching pathways. We've put a lot of work into this in Ontario Soccer, great teams efforts. The staff really put a lot of work into this. We have ways to get people in, to keep them in, to bring them through licensing, et cetera. So we have that set up. Now we know how to talk about what do we do about officiating the game, because as we know, there's no ref, there's no game. So we actually have to have officials. What do we do about those in Canada? So we actually have a really good, compared globally again, percentage of referees who are women. So we have, 21.5%, which is 9% globally. So we're doing better on officiating for women. We have a lot of officials in Ontario, but we know that it's still not back to where it was. But I know that the team has been working really hard on putting together plans to bring back referees to the game. And we're successfully globally, right? We have this, these are the referees that came from Canada and ended up at New Zealand in the World Cup. So based on what we know about participation, we have a really strong foundation. And again, it has a lot to do with the grassroots work that everybody in this room does to build that and provide those opportunities for the game. So let's talk a little bit about the next cog in the wheel, the commercial value of the game. How do we make more money? How do we get more money into the game? All right, so congratulations. All of you tonight are multi-millionaires. Here's a check for all of you. You get $300 million. And I'm also designed a time machine, and it's 2019. Man, pre-pandemic, very angelic time in our lives. We enjoyed a lot. With that $300 million, you have a decision to make. It's on the next slide, and I want from a show of hands, and you have to put your hand up for one of the two choices. All right? Here we go. You can buy a football club, and these are your two choices. You can buy Charlotte Football Club from the MLS, established in 2019, or you can buy Angel City FC from the NWSL. All right, it's a fast decision with your $300 million. Who's buying Charlotte from MLS? Put your hands up. You proud of your decision? Who's buying it? All right, who's buying Angel City FC? I think I might have talked about this last year. Okay, good choice. Here's your return on investment. When Angel City came into the league, it was $3 million to get into the league. Look at that return. It's 5,900%. All right. You still get a nice return from MLS. I'm not dishing MLS. Still a great league. Still get a nice return. You took your other money and you put it in an S&P 500 stock. You'd have $554 million. So you could probably buy the rest of the NWSL. Okay. If you're not following me and you don't believe this importance, here's the Toronto FC comparison, okay? Great return for Toronto FC from the beginning to where they are now. Took them 18 years to get there. Took Angel City FC 4. And my last slide to convince you that women's sports is where you need to put your money. Here's a 10-year comparison of MLS versus NWSL. Very similar franchise value, less in attendance, and really not a great media deal versus the one the NWSL just signed. So the reasons for this are women's sport has been grossly undervalued for years and decades. It is the place where you can make money in sports. It's the fastest growing thing that's out there. NWSL has more sponsors coming to them than the MLS is building. So bigger stables, bringing in more money. This is just a list. You're not going to read them all because I go fast through slides. These are the deals that are happening in women's sports. Investment companies, Mercury 13 and Investment Group has come together to buy women's sports franchises. The Chicago Cubs owner just bought the Red Stars. We're seeing people knowing that this is the place to put money in, okay? And what does that mean? We had record $1 million sales of NWSL franchises. We're having record salaries for women, record transfer fees for women in the game here in North America. So what does that tell me? It tells me that the NWSL has all of these cylinders going. Everything is turning. They are learning how to leverage events that happen and build the commercial value. They're building better governance. They're increasing the professionalism of the game, and they're building more opportunities for everybody. What do we have? We have Project 8. We have this opportunity here in Canada to do the same thing, right? We've been talking about it. We're going to hear a lot more about it tonight. But this is the same thing. This is where your money can go. This is where the interest is going to go. This is where we can build and have the ROI you're looking for to build a commercial value. We know that when people watch sports and have the ability to watch women's sports, they stay watching sports. So this is like from the UK Women's Sports Trust. 43% of the people who were new viewers to the Women's World Cup kept watching women's sport post the World Cup, right? Access is key. We need to make sure that the game is viable and invisible. The Zone gets it. They're going to make all the European games free to air so you can keep watching, right? We need your eyeballs. You got to watch the game. We know that consumption of women's sport has grown tremendously in the last couple of years. It gains more fans than men's sports do year over year for the last 4 years, and it is keeping those fans at a rate that men's sport is not. So it is the place where fans are taking their time and their effort to join, and once they get exposed and can watch the game, they're staying. What do we know about them? We know they're extremely loyal consumers. We know that they value brands who support women's sports and they'll purchase from them, and they value brands that women athletes themselves promote. So if you're thinking about this in terms of your organization, start thinking about what you can do. We're going to come back to it with your women and girls strategies for where investors and where commercial partners want to put their money. Oh, I should say that last part, sorry. In our study we did on women's sports fans in Canada, the average spent on merchandise was $63 a year. And we're like, oh, that's low. Why? Because you can't buy it. Every time they put out women's merchandise, it sells out. And that's because, my little plug here, algorithms that are used to decide what demand is going to be are very biased, and they don't believe there is demand for women's sport merch. And I can tell you, everybody who ever has tried to sell it can't keep it on the shelf, as the PWH Shewfelt this year. Oops. What else do we know about sports and soccer fans in Canada? There's a lot of newcomers in Canada. A lot of them are attached to the game. They come from soccer, football, mad countries, and they probably know the game better than we do. And they're coming here, and they're a great way to engage your organization with this growing population. And they're very much the same as we saw as fans of women's sport, attached to the brands that support the games that they love. Demographically, how does this break down? Thank you, Glenn, for sharing some of your slides with me and the information. I put some of my own data on there. We're very similar, you know, within an error bar of what we think the fans are. of particularly the women's team, 51% men. So if you think it's only women watching women's sports, wrong. Sports fans are sports fans, and we're now seeing them see women's sports as the same, right? So we got to break down, let's say it's 50-50, we split the difference between our two studies. But we also know that these are fans who consume sport regularly. Weekly, at least, they're watching games. So they're very highly attached. Oops. If you're thinking about how you make money, this is the top of the list. Obviously, the U.S. women's national team, Visa became their sponsor, a 2,700% increase in affinity for Visa, and the jersey had a 500% sellout feature for Nike, right? So again, this is the everything we put on sells out for women. Ally in its sponsorship of the NWSL is a company that saw the value again in terms of the consumers that attach themselves to this league, to the players, and to women's sport. And the people now are 10 times more likely to bank with this company than before they put their money into women's sport. Over here from the Sports Innovation Lab, we find that only like 9% of sponsorship money goes into women's sport. But 83% of the companies that they looked at said they're going to increase that spend. Why? Because they see numbers like 10 times more likely or 2,700% increases. And companies like to make money for shareholders. They see the value. So this is coming. This year alone, Deloitte's projecting that the market for women's sport is going to be $1.3 billion. First time over $1 billion. All right, I've done my gender part. Let me tell you about the thing you all know is coming in 2 years, right? We got a World Cup coming to Canada. Yes, very exciting, right? So this is your next accelerator event to think about. Biggest things we can have are one of the 2 World Cups in our game, and we've hosted one, and now we're having the men's come after. So what do we know? Big economic impacts. You can ask Chris more about this and what's coming, but we know that money is going to come because people will follow the game that they love, and they're going to come into communities and they're going to spend their money around the games, particularly in Toronto. What happened when the men qualified for the first time in 36 years? I remembered. We saw 14% interest right away of Canadians being more interested in watching the game. And what do we know now? That they're actually even more interested, 35, 36% of them even more interested in the game and being a part of it, etc. But a big part of this also has to do with national pride. So, right, we're going to get some games right here in Toronto from our national men's team starting it off. And this means a lot. This really is where people put their pride. And so think about that in terms of your club. There's going to be a lot of opportunities, and we'll talk a little bit at the end about how you can take advantage of the World Cup for your club. So we know that's from Nielsen again. Thanks a lot, Glenn, making my presentation snap a little bit even better. That we have a lot of fans, right? And soccer fandom is probably the biggest growing fandom right now, bigger than we see in some of the other sports. So there's a big opportunity for all of you to think about that. People are planning to go or watch the games, right? How many here are going to watch the games? How many are going to try to go to a game? There we go, right? This is what soccer fandom does. You want to be a part of it. So we know it's going to be I'm looking for tickets if anybody. Okay, but then they ask them, what are you most excited about? Here's the 2 things that are most important to all of you in the audience. What are the second most thing they're excited about? The potential boost to Canadian soccer development and youth involvement. Bingo, your world, right? Where you play, your playground. What's the third one? Expanding grassroots soccer initiatives and youth development programs. The World Cup is going to bring those opportunities because it's going to, in the next 2 years, increase the media focus on the games and matches that are coming. Ooh, good Lord. Go back. All right. So last part of this is what can we do? We have accelerator events, Project 8, the World Cup. You've got a lot of other ones that attach to your areas and you can build on. Anytime we got national teams going out, we get your own provincial teams going out, you get your clubs teams going out. You have events that you can leverage in terms of commercial value and enhancing the game. All right. The last part, and I'm doing all right. All right, this one's a big one. We got a lot to dig in around the foundation of our game to make sure we have it stronger. And there's a lot of work that you do in this room, and hopefully this weekend's going to help you learn some more to keep building that foundation. We've been through it. We're going to talk about all of that. I like to show this slide in a lot of my talks. This was a picture of the members of the Hockey Canada Board of Directors in their 2019-20 report, and that's the wording they used around that. We know lots of things have happened to Hockey Canada, so we won't beleaguer them. They have their problems. But this is where we were in sport at that time. And we thought these statements and this picture was okay, right? Canada Women's Sport does a yearly leadership snapshot that tells us where are we at with gender equity on boards and in different situations. So here we know we've been tracking, they've been tracking it over time. We're getting towards 50%. Some boards are doing better than other boards. And board leadership is starting to see women taking on the chair, like Charmaine here's with us tonight. All right. So we're seeing women in leadership. We're seeing women on boards. And we're seeing it in Canada Soccer. That's a better looking board than Hockey Canada. So are we a better looking board, Ontario? Right? We're seeing women in these roles. We're seeing women on the boards, and we're seeing diverse individuals. And I'm going to tell you, if you're not sold on this, I'm going to give you some reasons in this part of it why you need to do this with your board. We also like to talk about our staff. And a lot of people say, you know, we value diversity and inclusion, and you see where diversity and inclusion happens, which is entry level, and there's barriers to moving up in organizations. This is from McKinsey. It's a great report on sort of how women and diverse individuals sort of come in great numbers. And if you watch the spiral as we go up to the top, look who's in the CEO and the C-suites. It's still 56% white men in top countries across North America. So we still have a lot of work to do there, and sport is no different, right? We know that staff representation is getting better as well. And here's proudly our Ontario Soccer staff representation. Our executive team, 50-50 women, men. Thank you very much. Well done, team. Very happy to see that. A lot of work's being done to keep raising the number overall of women on our staff as well. We know, I got this a while ago. Maybe somebody has better data for me. This is what the Women's Football Member Association survey report told me about Canada Soccer. It was 44% women in our national federation. We also have been they started to track representation of individuals who either have a disability, who identify with a disability, or are from ethnic groups. And you can see these numbers are not great. Right. So when we talk about it, one of the things we've done a lot for equity in sport and everywhere is we promoted a lot of white women. Right. That's our first way we think about gender equity, is a lot of white women get in. And then, to be honest, I'm a white woman. I'm in there. My job is to make sure that I'm not the only woman, and that other individuals with diverse identities come along with me. It's throw down a net and bring more in. It's not kick down the ladder. Right. And so we know this is happening. Thankfully, we're starting to track it, but we need better data, and we need organizations to think about diversity at all. So this is some data that came out. Some of you may have filled out the survey for Canada Soccer. I did. And this is about barriers for women and girls in soccer in Canada. We're going to go through a bunch of this and see how it relates. So what's been the gender mix of referees, coaches, sports commentators, managers, administration? The women are the green. There's been a bit of a mix, but we still see predominantly a lot of men leading in soccer in Canada. We can see down here, for those of you who are from outside the province, it varies by province. And so when you see this data, it's time to take a look inside your organizations and see where you have high-performing organizations that have done well, and think what you can learn from them. The research has shown us that really the nature of sport leadership is often a male-dominated environment. And that makes it really hard for women to rise in organizations. And people told us that. What's been keeping you down? What's a negative experience? Poorly run leagues, politics, toxic masculinity, limited opportunities for advancements, etc. This is what women are telling us, what's the problem inside the games in our own country. Worldwide, 82% of women in football have experienced discrimination in the workplace. So we're not making it very friendly to women in general in this great game everybody loves. What could make it better? What are the things? Why are you getting them? Number one on this, why aren't you getting these? Old boys club environment and ethos. Perceptions that women are less competent than men. Lack of women role models, lack of representation, stereotypical perceptions of women in sport, fewer opportunities, and the list goes on. So let me help you with some of the research that dispels some of these myths. There's a big part about blaming women. Women don't want to coach, women have kids, women opt out. There's a whole list. This is Nicole Lavoie out of the Tucker Center for Women and Girls in Sport in the US. It's a great list to keep on your desk so you don't ever use them. What we did in our research is, we know that lots of research in the STEM field has shown that they do, take people's names off of CVs, et cetera. But when they put them back on, they reveal all the time that Jennifer looks less competent than John. So we decided to try to prove what we could with this. We took 20 years of women's basketball data in the WNBA and the NCAA, and we coded the gender of the coach, and we coded the outcomes of the games in terms of win and loss produced by the coach. Shocker, no difference whether the coach was a woman or a man in terms of wins produced. Here's the kicker that was the difference. They pay them in a lot more, right? For the same output that the women were already doing. Culture actually shapes men's behavior towards women. Culture treats us over and over. We're very gendered from the beginning. These are the things and the biases that are happening that keep women out of some of the leadership opportunities. Okay. Don't expect change until 30%. Research has shown us that you get any change on your board in terms of women, in terms of diverse individuals, 30% or more. So it can't be the tokenism. It can't be one, oh, look, we're diverse, right? We need diversity of thought. And if you don't believe me why we should do this, here's the data that really should start to sell you on it, okay? This again is McKinsey. Diverse boards and women represented at equal on boards equals 39% better financial performance for the organization. We all need resources, right? And we all need to put this into our board. This is the Canadian sample that some good friends of mine, Shannon Kerwin, did out of the University of Brock. They looked at NSOs and gender equality on the boards. And here's the kicker. The more gender equal your board was, the higher the revenues your national sport organization had. Right? So this is reasons to think about this in terms of your grassroots. Talk a little bit about coaches and what happens with coaches. This is what we call the leaky pipeline. They use this a lot in STEM fields for women, where women come into the system, a whole bunch of us, and we start leaking out, right? Here's reasons from the Ontario coaches why people leave coaching. So this is all coaches. Why do coaches leave? Time, parental conflicts, children age out. There's a lot of pressure and a lot of people talking about being more stressful post-COVID. I think Tracy will tell us a little bit more about that on Sunday. Politics of the game. These are the reasons that coaches are leaving the sport that they coach in. Let's put on the Canada soccer data. Why are women choosing to leave in the same ways? They're leaking out because perceptions of women are less competent. There's an old boys club. There's fewer opportunities. There's lack of training, lack of professional networks for women. So this is why we're losing women. And this works for coaching. This could work for administrators. This could work for all parts of our game. Women still do more housework than men. So let me remember back at the beginning when I told you who the volunteers were, and they were mostly women. Recent work still says, even if a woman makes as much money as her male partner or spouse, she still does 74% more of the work in the house, manages the kids, does all the stuff like that. And we want her to still to volunteer. So think about that with your volunteers. This is the coaches' gender gap in international leagues for women across the world. The green is women again. There's some who have none. And very few. Nobody gets only one over 50%. And we don't pay them well, right? We can have a long conversation about compensation for coaches, but at the national level, internationally, we're still not paying them well. Here's what women coaches told us. They told Abacus, in this thing, 45% of them had abuse from parents, coaches, or referees that men coaches did not experience, right? A third of them felt they were excluded because they're women, and they're not listened to or consulted with because they're women, 42%. And there's this thing called the glass cliff, which is where things are in a really bad situation. Let's get a woman leader in there, right? And so you set her up and you think, well, we've done our diversity thing. We hired a woman. This is going to be great. And you give her none of the tools to succeed. And so in data out of the United States and the college level, they looked at years of this and said, women are more likely to be hired as coaches following a really poor performing team. So they're handled a team that is in, shambles and said, hey, you fix it. And then of course she's not going to be successful because she's not getting the tools to make that transition. And we see that too, what are the things that are going to make a positive experience for women in sports here in Canada and soccer? We want better relationships with the community. They still love the sport. We've got to keep them in it. So there's things that are positive for them. What are the solutions that are going to make important to implement? You'll like number one, I think, Diana. Number one's pretty good. We need to get that professional women's soccer league. We need more programming for women, and we need proper coaches support. So we have these things that have started. This is a great program that started at Guelph Soccer. She can coach. Very proud of that one. Right, Sarah? And it can be scaled up nationally. Now it's TELUS she can coach, right? So we know that there's programs that we put in port that are looking at the barriers, that are bringing women into the game, that are keeping them there, right? We know we got a referee shortage. We need to do something about that. And how do we get women into those roles? And how do we build pathways for them in these situations? Well, one of the things that's got a lot of press for us has been the referee cam. So if, again, we think women's coaches have more abuse, I've got to think women's officials have the same level of more abuse. And now we're starting to be able to capture it to try to change behavior of coaches, parents on the sidelines. So it's also important to know that you can't be what you can't see. So if we do not have diverse individuals and women in key leadership roles, people will not aspire to be them. It's why we need a professional women's league. It's why we need that, because people will aspire to be those athletes. So we need to show the equality. We need to have people in our game that represent the nation that we are in. Here's a couple other things. Statements that came out from Abacus. 70% believe that men's and players are funded better than women's players and clubs. I would say that's probably true. And also they get less resources and opportunities for the game. People also told us that they get often that women are the only women on their staff, and they find that exhausting. So remember, nothing changes to 30%. We need to build those networks for women into those roles, and they get less respect inside of the organizations from their colleagues. What could be done? Could the following be effective to improving? There's a lot of great ideas here: increasing the number of women mentors, more formal recognition, more dedicated capacity. This report gives a lot of ideas on how we can keep moving forward and building a better game for women. In terms of participation, I'll go back into some of the MLSE data. This is what makes youth want to play. They want making sport more affordable. That's good for us. They want, better settings. They want to have a more inclusive environment. When we looked at soccer again in the MLSE data, soccer here, the interesting thing is they never identified affordability as a problem. Soccer is one of the most affordable sports. Even when, at the high level, the average playing to spend on soccer is less than other sports. And in fact, really, what do you see? Kids put down 2 bags and they have a ball and they can start playing, right? It's an accessible, affordable sport. Oops. What do we know here that they want out of soccer? Soccer on this side, they're looking for some of the same things. They're excited about the Women's Pro League. They want more mentorship. They want life skill development. These are all things they want from the game at the grassroots going on. But here's the problem. 31% or almost 32% of them saw that one of the biggest barrier or only barrier to inclusion is racism and discrimination, and 24% of them have experienced it in the game. This is self-reporting from teenagers playing the game here in Ontario, right? So how do we improve it? Here they told us what they want. They want it to be more friendly. They would like it to be, where their peers accept them, the organization supports them, and they want coaches that look like them and are them. What we hear from Canadian Women in Sport is the barriers to inclusion for women or girls in sport are even higher, and they drop out at much bigger rates. So if we look at the number of women and girls playing globally and in CONCACAF, we have some really big numbers here, right? We think, oh, there's a great number of girls playing this sport. But when we look at the gap inside Canada, we're still not at the same level. We don't have 50-50. And in fact, it looks like post-pandemic, we had a little blip here, but it might be widening the gap between participation for girls. And that we said from this data again, that really said there's a lot of gender bias inside our game. If 89% of the women surveyed agreed that boys and men's soccer is taken more seriously. It's a little ludicrous to me, to be honest, in this room, when our women's national team has been the most successful team we have. Why is women and girls who feed into that not taken as seriously as the boys in the game? So then, same data, this is girls who play soccer. What do girls want? Friendly environment, peers accept me, coaches like me, mental health services, some of the same, but more of, please. So if you're going to design your environment to keep women and girls playing in your sport, you need to make them even more friendly and more receptive. We have programs doing this. BMO's Girls Played On Junior Leadership Series here in Ontario Soccer is a great example of bringing in both young players to play and giving, teenage girls the chance to be mentors and be mentored themselves. Canada Soccer's just got a bunch of money and they're going to start putting this in across the country as well. So how can this help your organization, and how can we build more inclusive, community sport for all at the grassroots level all the way through our country? All right, I'm wrapping it up in a fast way. All right, how can you do this? Here's your roadmap. It's going to be high level with some key things you can think about. And I'm around all weekend if anybody wants to talk about this. All right, so first thing is we got to focus on building, from the last points, the sport environment that our youth, our coaches, our officials, our administrators desire. And it's different than the one we have right now. Right? So how can we do this? How can you use IDEA as a strategy? I do think the diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility is a business strategy because it pays off. Incorporate a strategy for women and girls separate in your organization. Do an audit, see how they're treated differently, fix it, make it a strategy, right? Create a recruitment strategy overall. How can you leverage Project 8? How can you leverage the game that's coming in 2026? And then what do we know about how you get to parents, social media, right? Think about ways that you can build this. This is from the report that just came out this week from the World Cup in Australia. The key thing here, this is one group. Before the World Cup came to Australia, they had one U16 girls with 14 players. During the year, they grew U8, U12, U16, and senior women's team, right? This is the excitement around hosting the Women's World Cup. This is what's coming with 2026 in Canada. What we know from research is mega events like FIFA don't always just skyrocket participation. What they do is they do bring you some small things, and it starts 2 years earlier. So we're going to start to see an increase starting now in the interest of the game. But the intensity of how people want to participate increases. They see the World Cup, they want to be on the accelerated level. They want to play more. They want to be in different parts of your game. You get them into the grassroots and they're going to want more soccer. Maybe it'll work. There we go. The other thing that one of the studies showed is investing in technical staff. Now, I know that means recruiting and getting volunteers, but essentially, if you had 12 or more technical multidisciplinary at the Women's Professional League, you are more likely to win. So thinking about that and creating an environment for success in your organization, how can you increase some of the technical and support staff volunteers that you need to do that inside your organization? So here's your roadmap for the weekend. So first of all, you want to come to Dr. Tracy Valancourt's keynote to help with it. And here are some sections and sessions you're going to want to do. They're going to help you focus on building a better sport environment and increasing governance in your organizations. And then if you're on the other side, in terms of technical staff, too many to list in terms of the officiating and coaching ones. And of course, you want to see Nick tomorrow morning. So here's your passport on the participation side and how you can change yourself and learn this weekend so you can be the leader on the participation side. Let's talk a little bit about how we're going to do with commercial, all right? The first thing is thinking about, geez. There we go. Stop. Develop a partnership strategy. So if you don't have one, think about it. Think about how you build a partnership strategy. Think about some of the things about how people want to attach themselves to the games, and especially what's happening in the next 2 years here. 72% of clubs generating higher revenue from negotiating sponsorship contracts exclusively for women's teams at the professional and semi-professional level. So think about unbundling your teams and selling them differently. Sell your girls' teams to different sponsors than you sell your boys' teams to, because there are different audiences and different brands. Think about government funding opportunities that you can take advantage of. So, we have private sector money and we have public money that you can build your strategy. This is again from the FIFA World Cup for Women. We've got things where you're looking at watch parties and you're putting together opportunities. Think about the connections to players, to your clubs or to your province, and how can you use that around the World Cup that's coming. And then really think about sponsorship as both a necessity and an opportunity. You're providing an opportunity to organizations that really want access to what you have. Local businesses are key. We have parents that are very concerned about rising costs, and you need to have an opportunity to provide them with ways to offset some of those costs. And then we also know that parents like to watch women's sports, and they engage with it, and they watch it very frequently. So not only are they looking for sponsors, they're a great audience for partners and local businesses to engage with. And here's your roadmap to do that while you're here. Oh, great, you're already here at the section, so this is good. You came to the right keynote to start with. There you go. And we've got a couple more great sessions coming up about how you can build relationships, digital marketing, and esports, because it's another avenue for participation and commercial opportunities. All right, and the last part here is how do we do all this and build the foundation? I just also want to hazard, we have missing data. So if any ways that you want to collect data, if you can start collecting intersectional data on your participants, and your people in your organizations, we can start looking at where we actually sit in the games in terms of diversity and inclusion. So we know that you need a strategic plan. You really do. Recent research done by a PhD student at Guelph showed that 100% of NSOs, 86% of PSOs, and 0 community sport organizations that she looked at had strategic plans publicly available. So you may have one, but it's not public. People can't read it. They don't know what you're doing. You talk about missions and visions and values, but you don't have a plan that goes further than that. So think about that. Create a recruitment plan focused on diversity in your leadership, on your boards, and with your people. There's a great opportunity to do this. It's called the 50-30 Challenge. Government of Canada's put this out. There's amazing toolkits on this website that'll help you figure out how to diversify the leadership in your organization. Let's take advantage of it. Think about how you can do it. And of course, while you're here, well, again, you're at the right keynote. And there's some great opportunities and sessions coming up over the next 2 days that will allow you to think about this. There's strategic planning. If you don't have one, great session. Go to it, figure out how you can do this. Integrating DEI into your club. How do we look at that? How do you deal with difficult people who won't want to make these changes? That's probably going to be a real important session to get to. All right, so if we do these things together and we start investing in different parts, starting what you're doing while you're here this weekend, we can start to make these wheels move at a pace that will bring the resources and the change and the participation to the game that we're all desiring while we're here. Rapid fire, but I'm done. I may not want to talk for a while, but that was fast.
Thank you, Dr. Ann. If we could clone you, I feel like that would be really awesome. My goodness, like so much knowledge. Please join me in thanking Dr. Ann with another warm round of applause. So while we're prepping the stage for the panel discussion, I'm going to call on Robin, Manager of Marketing, Partnerships, and Events, to come up and, oh, there she is. What's that? You want a party? Oh, do you want a party? Let's ask okay, we all want a party. She's going to be our game hostess, and she did such a great job last year, so no wonder we've asked her to do it again. So we're going to go through a fun little game, a couple little games, and you could potentially win some prizes. So I'm glad you're here.
Hey everyone, I'm pretty excited to be back up here with all of you. Anyone that was in Ottawa might remember our prizing fun that we had, and I'm looking forward to bringing that here today. You'll get used to this red bag and all of the joys that you can find within it. You'll start seeing me and expecting prizes, and it'll be great. And sometimes I'll have them and sometimes I won't. So today, I'm so excited. We've got some amazing partners that have brought some amazing prizes. And I will say, anyone that was in Ottawa, guys, I don't need the phone this time. I'm a bit better prepared. We have the wheel, okay? The wheel is ready. Let's get a round of applause for the wheel. Yes. So, that's a relief because there was swiping and it was wild. Okay, so now this is a professional operation, and so we're going to get started. So for anyone that remembers the promotion that was going on, we had a promotion to register by February 1st, and that gets you entered into a draw to win. Done. Let me get it because I have it right here. One of these. Oh, yeah. Chelsea, come on up. Vanna. All right, so we've got the wheel, and it's preloaded with everyone that registered by February 1st. Congratulations. And we're gonna ask Tom to spin the wheel. Now, hold on, not all at once. I'm not ready yet. I gotta tell you the rules. So for all of the other prizes, you have to be in the room to win. We can remember that, right? So it can sometimes be like a tiny bit painful because we like spin it a couple times. But anyway, just means you have to be here. For this one, we're going to give you a bit of a break because, you know, it was the promo that we were running and that type of thing. So on the count of 3, we're going to say, Tom, spin that wheel. 1, 2, 3. Tom. Oh, okay. Okay, this is the winner. I hope the person's here, but they don't have to be. Kim Gamble. Where's Kim? Is she here? Kim's not here. Well, that's fine because I'm going to stick to my promise. So this jersey is for Kim. Okay, so don't worry, I've got a couple more prizes. My next prize is I've got a CPL prize pack, and this one happens to be a Hamilton Forge focused prize pack, which is very exciting. And for this one, no wheel needed. We are going to celebrate someone's birthday today. Does anyone have a birthday today? Come on, Dr. Ann, I thought that for sure the stats would give me a birthday today. Okay, does anyone have a birthday yesterday? Oh, yesterday! We got it yesterday! Oh. Perfect, come on down. Yeah, what do you guys think? Should I ask for some identification or can anyone vouch for this? I don't know. All right, happy birthday. You know what? I'm going to do it. Can we just sing a quick happy birthday to our new friend? I think it's going to be really fun. Okay, sorry. Can I just get your name? Chris, okay. You guys know how it goes. Happy birthday to you. Faster. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Chris. Happy birthday to you. Thank you. All right. So we've practiced this once before. We're going to do it again. I have an amazing prize pack from our friends at Vaughan Tourism, as well as the 4 Point Sheridan and Reptilia, and the McMichael Canadian Art Collection. So this is kind of like a getaway, like a little Vaughan getaway. And we're going to ask Tom to spin the wheel. Spin that wheel. 1, 2, 3. Tom, spin that wheel. Come on. Glen! Wow! Glen! Here's the thing. You guys, funny story. Glen's on the panel tonight. So we're gonna try again. Okay. But Glen did the right thing by registering. It got him into the system. So thank you, Glen. 1, 2, 3. Tom, spin that wheel. Mark, is he here? Mark, you're killing me. Go ahead, Tom. Aaron, is Aaron here today? Yeah. And a lovely night in Vaughan, Ontario. That sounds like a great time. Okay. There you go. Awesome. Okay, we have our last prize. We're going to spin the wheel again. This one, I have a feeling you guys are going to love this one. Not that you didn't love the others, because they're great. But this one is $250 to Sport Check. Yes. All right. Tom, spin that wheel. Annabella. Is Annabella here? Oh, she's going to be sorry. Let's go again. You guys will have to tell her that her name came out. Oh, gosh. Mario. This is great news for all of you, okay? You're still in it. Let's go, Tom. This is it. I can feel it. This is happening. Chrissy. Yes? Oh, you guys, I totally got my hopes up. No, Chrissy? Okay. Oh, I know. I'm on the edge of my seat. Jeff Hughes. Jeff. Oh, Jeff, you can stay there. Jeff, we're gonna meet up after. It's electronic, so don't worry. I'll just email it to you. All good. Okay, that's it for tonight. But don't worry, I'll be back, and we'll do it again. You want your phone?
I'd now like to call upon Bjorn, Ontario Soccer Senior Director of Business, to panel intro. You can clap.
Thank you, Chelsea. Good evening, everyone. Having fun yet? That was a pretty high-powered start. How about that, Dr. N? Unbelievable. As someone who has assembled some pretty wicked slide decks in my day, mostly wicked meaning long, that was unbelievable. So thank you for that. And of course, Robin, once again, extraordinaire. And I think we'll publish the names of all the people that weren't here just to remind people why you really want to be here on a Friday night of the Ontario Soccer Summit. Anyways, we're now going to, like a good soccer game, the second half of proceedings, and it's our power panel. And when we say power panel, we're not joking around. You will see in a minute what we mean. We have an outstanding cast, of course, to be led by Dr. N as the host. And so if you help me to give a warm summit welcome to these amazing presenters, we would like to start, brought to us by our friends and partners from BMO. We are super excited to welcome the Head of Community and Marketing for a now iconic Angel City FC. We saw the case study, and now we see the real face and leadership behind it. Please welcome Katryna Dávila. Katryna will tell us all about Angel City FC, the generational fandom strategy, and many more fun things that she's been up to. The other amazing person, iconic on the field of play for Canada, and just about to become even more iconic off the field of play with the leadership work that she's doing. Chief Executive Officer of Project 8 and the dynamo behind kickstarting Canada's Professional Women's Soccer League, Diana Matheson. We heard a lot about grassroots and participation, and let's face it, that's really what most of us here in the room are involved in, day out. And we have a remarkable ambassador and champion for that, the executive director of Oakville Soccer Club, the architect of grassroots success of one of the largest amateur sports clubs in North America, Katryna Indewey. This next panelist, I had a good chuckle with when I talked to him earlier, trying to check where he was in his ETA coming here. And I said, don't worry, I will make a short and sweet introduction. And he burst out laughing because he's worked with me for years and he knows that I can do one thing and it's being short and sweet. Maybe sweet, never short. He is the Vice President, Business Operations of Toronto FC and the Toronto Argonauts. And at some point he paused and he realized, hey, wait a minute, between the hours of midnight and 3 a.m., I still have some time in my schedule. So he also became the MLSE lead for the FIFA World Cup 2026 Toronto, Mr. Chris Shewfelt. And last but not least, from our friends and partners at the CPL and Canadian Soccer Business, we're welcoming Glen Johnson, who is the Executive Vice President. So Glen, welcome to the Ontario Soccer Summit. And of course, now inviting back our very own Dr. N to lead you through the power panel discussion. Thank you very much. Enjoy.
Hopefully you guys are not sick of me. I'll try not to talk a lot in this one. So if you are using the app, you can send me questions on the keynote and I'll ask them because I decided not to prepare too many. I think this is a great group and we want to listen more to them. So I think where I want to start with the two accelerator events and see if we can get some updates. So Diana, I'll start with you. Where are we with Project 8? What's the most exciting things happening and what do you want to share with us all tonight?
Wouldn't it be fun if I had a super exciting announcement tonight? I don't, sorry. Oh gosh, I was here last year, I guess same time, and what we would have announced. We announced in December. Prior to that, we were doing the thing, so we would have had 2 clubs at that point. I know we still only announced 3 clubs, Vancouver, Calgary, Toronto. We've signed enough additional clubs to be good to go for 2025. So we've just been busy doing all the been a lot of building going on behind the scenes. And I know everyone's been very patiently waiting. And I keep saying there's things coming. There are. We've been working on the league branding. I know we've been saying that for a while, but the league does have a name and it won't be Project 8. So that'll be coming out in the next few months along with the announcements of the rest of our cities. And then we keep building more publicly with you folks towards next April 2025.
Awesome. Exciting. If you couldn't tell from what I said, I'm pretty excited about Project 8 and the opportunities. So I'll move to Chris. Chris, next big event after Project 8 in 2025 is the World Cup. And so I don't know if you have anything you want to share or where we're at with it.
Yeah, a couple things. So MLSE is involved in a number of different ways with World Cup 2026 Toronto. One is stadium redevelopment and renovation. So I'll talk a little bit about that because it's an exciting project. Where we're going to be left at the end of these games is BMO Field. The tournament might be called Toronto Stadium, but BMO Field will be left in a much better spot because of the tournament. So the project is well underway. We're working closely with the City of Toronto on redevelopment of our National Soccer Stadium. And a lot of plans are still to be announced, so I can't share too much. But I am certainly here on behalf of MLSE, but certainly representing the City of Toronto as well. You're going to see a number of permanent improvements to BMO Field, a lot of which construction will start to take place at the end of this year. So yes, the games are in 2026, but a lot of the work is being done right now to prepare. So this off season, you'll see a lot of permanent improvements to BMO Field. And then in the next off season, November of 25 through to February of 2026 is where you'll see a lot of the temporary modular improvements to the games. A ton of work is being done besides the venue. There's a lot of efforts around commercial in order to drive additional revenue for the budget for the City of Toronto. There's a lot of work being done around legacy. There's a lot of work being done around FanFest. It is in full steam ahead. The City of Toronto is staffed up. They've got their secretariat in place. And then FIFA Canada is well underway in hiring their staff. So a significant amount of effort happening right now with World Cup 2026. And I keep reminding people at our company, we're involved in a lot of those different capacities that I just mentioned. It does seem like it's a far time away, but it's not. It's right upon us. And you talked, Dr. Ann, about the accelerator, and that's 2 years out, right? It's a few years out. And we're starting to see that in the marketplace as well. So tons of exciting programming happening right now.
Thanks. Nick told me he wanted to see change of pace. So I feel like that's where we're headed with both these projects, the accelerating and what's happening in sort of the soccer ecosystem for Canada. I think we're going to watch things speed up really, really quick. So I'm going to switch and go to my favorite team I want to talk about, Angel City FC. So Katryna, maybe just share us a little bit about what is like Angel City's unique approach to the business of soccer and how does that roll down into your position with them?
Absolutely. And first of all, can you hear me? Thumbs up if you can hear me. Great. Thank you. I will say that the first thing that made Angel City unique in the business of women's soccer is that we treated it like a business. And that sounds very basic, but if you look at the history of soccer and professional women's soccer in the United States, and forgive me, I am from the United States. It's not my fault. It wasn't a choice. I know. I am also sorry for myself. No, it's, we had two professional leagues that failed before the NWSL came into being. And the NWSL came into being as a league that was so terrified of folding that it barely spent any money. It barely resourced. And the thing that I think Angel City has done differently from the get-go was say, if you want to have a professional team, you treat it like a professional team from the beginning. And so what that means is, and there's lots of things that we did that were bizarre for the sports industry. It's like, you know, tech kind of infrastructure in terms of seed money, and we are a startup. We're still a startup. We're trying not to be a startup in our entering our 4th year. But really it was, we said, if you want to bring fans, if you want to sell out stadiums, which we've done, by the way, if you want to sell out those stadiums, then you have to have a marketing team. You can't have one person who's sitting by themselves trying to do community ticketing, marketing, PR, trying to sell sponsorships. And so that from the get-go was the thing that we did differently. And then I will say too, that I think that we had an undue emphasis on community. And I say that as the head of community and marketing, which meant that I think we understood, and this was being born in a pandemic, that the only way to succeed in a marketplace like LA, which has 11 other pro sports teams, was to actually go out and meet people and put a face to our name. I genuinely, you know, in my first several months on the job, I was me by myself in a room making calls. There's a brewery in Los Angeles called Angel City Brewery. And I would say, hey, it's Catherine from Angel City. You work with the brewery now? No, I'm with the women's professional team. There's a women's professional soccer team. Yeah, there's a league. There's a league. So it genuinely, like, there's a massive amount of education that's gone into Angel City too, but it really has been from day one, going out and meeting people where they are, putting a face to a name, and showing that we're actually invested in this community, that we want to show up at our stadium.
Awesome. I will say, this little plug, I'm going to the home opener.
Yes.
Academic world lets me go to conferences. Coincidentally, one is going to be in Burbank when the home opener is on. So I had to pay a lot for the tickets, just to be clear. And the state, yeah, I should have called, but I did the good thing and I gave my money instead.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. I'll switch over to Glenn and maybe tell us a little bit about the story of, you know, people in the room probably know it, but a little bit more where we could learn from CPL, as you know, in building professionalism and that level in the Canadian soccer ecosystem.
Yeah, thank you. You know, we're about to enter our 6th season, but again, it still feels very much like a startup. You know, it's probably really our 3rd and a half season. We had great momentum in 2019 and then had a little bit of a issue there in 2020 and slowed down a bit, but you know, we're very excited, very excited. We came off our best year ever last year. Revenues were growing, ticket sales were up, merchandise sales were up. People were coming back to the stadiums, having a great time. Our final last year, we couldn't have scripted it any better. A little Olympico in extra time, you know, just for the fans. But no, we're very excited about where we are. You know, we're 8 clubs. We've got some brand new ownership right here, right outside the back door at York University. Very thrilled to have the Pascal family, the 3 brothers. 2 of their wives are very active on the board as well. You know, they're part of a much larger ownership group out of Mexico with relationships in Monterrey. So we're very excited to start, you know, continuing to bring in the right kind of people and the right kind of owners that want to invest. I think that's the other key thing out of all of this is that, you know, we've had our challenges. You know, we had to fold a club, you know, in Edmonton. We had to find a new owner. We bought the club back here, you know, last year from the Baldessera family. So we bought it back. We bet on ourselves. We found a new owner. They've invested. We sold that franchise for, you know, 3 times what we sold our first franchise for. We're already seeing, you know, some of that growth, you know, inside our own business, and we're very excited about expansion. You know, we've got 3 incredibly legitimate expansion opportunities in front of us. You know, we hope we're going to be 12 clubs by 2026, but you know, it's a lot of hard work. So, but we're very excited. We're excited about the pathway that we're providing to right now to the men in this country, and you know, nobody wants us to have Diana's project be more successful than us. More professional soccer in this country is better for everyone, right? we should all be together here fighting basketball and hockey and everything else, like not each other. So I think it's important that we come together and, do the best that we can together on the professional level and, working with our friends in MLS. We've got some great relationships with loans and sell-ons and, things that are just changing the landscape in Canada, to make us a soccer nation. So we're just very excited about that.
Yeah. Well, we see from the data I looked at that soccer is the number one choice of kids and youth in Ontario to play. So let's talk a little bit about the grassroots and building a club. Oakville is a model club we hear, and maybe you want to share a little bit about your experiences, Katryna, and tell us what do you think is the biggest issues that you're tackling, but where are you finding sort of your successes at the grassroots level?
For sure, thanks. That will not slow me down. So first of all, I'm tall and I took the high seat because too bad. Let's just acknowledge the elephant in the room. I'm thrilled to be here with you, my peers and my friends in the industry. I think Oakville is a large club, and some very cool players have come from Oakville. But we all live in the same universe. We all have a responsibility to this game because none of this exists without what we do. We not only build the players that come up through the process and play in the game, but we build the love of the sport. Professional sport and growth and acceleration in sport does not exist without fandom in sport. And that doesn't exist without the love of the sport. And we start that at a really, really young age. And most of us in this room have that responsibility to do that. And we are the architects of this game, and we are architects of professional sport and how things can become successful and how we can support Angel City and Project 8 and CPL and MLSE and the World Cup and make all of that successful. We have a lot of that's a big job. That's a massively huge job. And whether you're a large organization that has been lucky enough to be in a community and be in an environment that has grown and thrived in the way that Oakville has, or if you're in a smaller community and you're starting to build that, the challenges remain the same. Is how do you resource that effectively and how do you invest properly in your programs to make them successful? And Dr. Ann talked about that as far as professionalism within the sport and creating some change inside the sport and creating some movement and seeing that equity in sport with diversity and inclusion. That's imperative. That's how we move forward together as a sport and we acknowledge the growth and where we need to do better as a group. I think a couple of the challenges, again, that comes with it's probably number one is going to be our financial resourcing, especially as a not-for-profit club. It's almost impossible to figure out what that formula is. But gone are the days where we subscribe to the theory that especially in a not-for-profit environment, that we don't invest in staff, that we don't compensate staff accordingly and according to what they do in the days of everybody doing 10 jobs for the compensation of less than one person is not a sustainable model and not for the growth that this sport is about to experience, has experienced, and is about to experience in the next 2 years. So we have to think about how we resource effectively. The cheapest computers, the cheapest programs, the cheapest infrastructure are not going to work going forward. We have to think about how to resource and how to invest in that effectively to grow the base for the game. Because if we can't grow and we can't retain and we can't attract participation to the game, the pathways to fall in love with it become smaller, and we want to create a larger subset of people to celebrate that. So I think it's really professionalism within clubs, and that's looking at your governance models, looking at sort of the way things used to be and the way things used to be run and thinking differently about that and changing that model from operations to governance and resourcing your club effectively and then leveraging the resources of each other in the room. Some of us have the blessing to be a little bit bigger. Some of us are smaller. We are all in this game together. We compete on the field, but we have resources collectively in this room that can move each other forward. So don't be afraid to ask for them and collaborate them. Protecting things like policy and improvement, there's no benefit to that. Share that, ask for it, and then we can grow that foundation. We can help each other to have a stronger foundation to expand the opportunity to fall in love with the game at the youngest level and grow from there.
Awesome. That's, yeah. Could be next year's keynote speaker, I think. Everybody keeps sending the questions in, so I'll ask one from the audience, and I think it's going to be one that we all maybe are following. So I'm going to go back to you, Diana, as a start. What is the success of the PWHL, the Professional Women's Hockey League, if you're not following? What does that mean for Project 8?
Ooh. Is this one working now? Yeah. Honestly, one of the biggest things, data and proof points. And that's been huge. Has anyone been to a game in Toronto yet? Come on, get to it. Okay, tickets are hard to get, actually.
Tickets are really hard to get.
Helena there
Watch
has some
every-
tickets if you need tickets. Helena knows where to find tickets, so go find her from AFC Toronto. Actually, Helena, I need some, if you could get me some. Honestly, the presentation Dr. Ann did today was probably the greatest collection of women's pro sport stats I've seen so far. And like, yeah. And like, we're living it. Like there was maybe 2 or 3 on there I hadn't seen. I had never seen them collected in one space so effectively. And I would say 2, maybe 3 years ago, there was probably 10% of the stats she had in that presentation existed. And that's been the problem around women's sport. There's been myths and biases that have surrounded the game. Forgive me if any of you heard me talk already this year, but I went to see Copa 71. Seen Copa 71? Anyone seen Copa 71 besides Helena? Nope, just Helena. Okay, I don't think it's out yet, but it was produced actually by Serena and Venus. It was their production company. It was the story of Copa 71, which was it was back in 71, as you can imagine. We were coming off the 60s, like men's football was exploding. Pele was playing. The World Cup was in color for the first time, like the FIFA Men's World Cup, Mexico. After that, a group of people said, okay, you know what? Let's do that for the women. So they went to FIFA. FIFA said, no, we're not going to do that. We checked with our doctors, and actually it's really bad for women's reproductive organs to play football. So pass. Some people went and put it on anyways. FIFA wouldn't let them use a bunch of the stadiums. They had to play in the 2 biggest stadiums, Mexico. They brought 5 teams from all over the world. Long story short, they played in front of 110,000 people at Azteca Stadium in 1971. And this was a story I, as a soccer player, had never heard. I think they had Alex Morgan in it. They had a few other players to say, I had never heard of this thing until FIFA decided women's football was a thing in the 90s. And that's been the sport we've grown up in. Women's sport didn't make money. No one watches women's sport. And it's been impossible to disprove without data. And it's only been the last 3 years where there's actually been data to point to. Now we can say owners that bought into the NWSL for $150,000 in 2012, their franchises are now valued average of 66 million. Now we have all the stats that are in Dr. Ann's presentation. PWHL is doing that for us. And nobody, us, women's hockey, nobody thought the attendance was going to be as good as it's been. It's crushed. Like the fact they sold out Scotiabank in what, an hour? I was on a pre-list and I couldn't even get those tickets. That's beyond what everyone expected, but we've known there's been a market here and a market here waiting to spend, a market here that's more engaged than other sport fans and spends more. And I know that's been our hypothesis in building this league. We have one of the best women's sport countries in the world. We've got a lot of challenges. We're big. We know our media landscape is rough, doesn't pay a lot of money, but we love soccer. We're really fucking good at women's soccer, and our fan base is one of the best in the world. Us in the US have the most supportive women's sport fans in the world, period. And forgive me if I said this last year too, but I did a course through UEFA before I started doing this project. And one of the biggest takeaways from that is we are a decade ahead of the rest of the world, even countries you think we're side by side, England, Germany, wherever, when it comes to supporting women's sport, we're light years ahead and our market's ahead. So we just got to build something here and we know the market's there. And I have no idea what your question was. Did I answer it? I think I answered it.
You answered it.
Data
You
was
answered
the
it.
answer.
Yeah.
And
Data's the answer.
go find some tickets to the Matheson Center and check out a women's hockey.
Yeah. But she's true. I could do an entire 45 minutes just on women's sports data. I couldn't have done that 2 years ago because it didn't exist. Every single time we see a women's event in almost any sport being put on, it breaks some sort of a record. right? We're seeing whether it's attendance records, ticket sales records, sponsorship records, salary records, they're all being broken and it just needs to keep happening. So now we can actually show that. And I do firmly believe the ROI is there. Angel City is probably the best proof. I love to use that example. And so if anyone is in this room who has money and is thinking about where to put it right now, put a bunch in women's sports and maybe put a bunch in stocks because it looks like the market's getting better. I got a question from the audience for, I guess we'll start with Chris, but others can answer or chime in. So we're about to host the FIBA World Cup, if we hadn't talked about that already. What recommendations you have for community soccer clubs, which is our audience tonight, across the country for business opportunities with small, medium-sized businesses who really drive our economy? What do you see as the opportunity? How do we capitalize on it at the community level? What's coming?
I think it's a great opportunity, and I think it's a great question because it's something we're talking about a lot as we approach the market for this program. I think there's a real opportunity for the province of Ontario as part of their funding model to engage youth soccer, and it has to happen, right? So all three levels of government are investing in World Cup 2026 across Vancouver, obviously, and then here in Toronto, we've got Ontario and Toronto investing. So the money doesn't just need to be spent here in Toronto. The governments are going to want to expand that investment. So what can you do at the local level? Is there the community watch parties that we talked about? Is there leveraging of the World Cup 2026 Toronto IP? How do you work with the city of Toronto in order to leverage that at the youth level? We're having conversations with Bjorn and Johnny about opportunities to, just like this, to talk about that expansion of the program. The brand of FIFA is massive, but what we're trying to do here is much more. We are trying to grow the sport. Yes, this is an accelerator, and you talked a lot about the youth level is the most important part of that accelerator. And I'll tell you, it is, because I've sold across the Leafs and the Raptors in my career. And since 2006, we've been selling soccer, and it's a ground up approach. It's not the top down approach, right? I'm selling hockey very differently than we're selling soccer. So what we're doing at the grassroots is vitally important to what Glen and I are doing at the professional level as well, because without the work that you're doing to grow participation, and the numbers compared to hockey right now are much more significant from a participation standpoint. Think where we can be after 2026, right? We know it's going to get kids excited. When I think about Toronto FC, when we think about signing Jonathan Osorio long-term or now Richie Laryea as of this morning, thank goodness that deal got across the line. It's been a long time in the works. But we know that it's going to create heroes as well for the kids. So your youth soccer clubs, are they excited about our Canadian internationals that are playing at the national level? Are you creating a connection between all these Canadian athletes, whether it's the men's game or the women's game, and create those connections to your clubs? Are you bringing those athletes back to your communities? You'd be surprised if you ask the questions and to get those athletes back to your communities, because we want to do that. We want to think about bringing our athletes where they grew up. How do we continue to give back? And I know in the women's game, I think that's probably going to be an important part of what Diana and all the teams are going to do as well, is get those people into the communities and those athletes. So huge opportunity at the grassroots level. Continue to do what you're doing because it's really helping us grow the game. The biggest challenge for us always as we're selling soccer has been broadcast audience isn't there, and the media landscape isn't where we need it to be. We hope World Cup 2026 will be that growth, that accelerator to get the broadcast partners excited. We go through MLS Cup 2016 or 2017 and 19. We'll have 1 million people watching one of our soccer games for the MLS Cup or for playoffs, but then the broadcast audience drops right down. So all these amazing soccer participating families that are out there, right? The largest participant sport. They're not tuning in to watch local football. They might tune in to watch global football. They're watching EPL, or they're watching, the league that, might be most comfortable to them, but they're not necessarily spending enough time watching CPL or watching Major League Soccer. So I hope that when Project A launches, that, we've got a different league. We've got a league for women. Maybe the audience, broadcast audience, will be there. It hasn't been there yet on a sustained level for professional men's soccer, aside from the big events. World Cup is going to drive massive audiences. CONCACAF Champions League, Doesn't drive big audiences, so bigger, but not huge, right? Gold Cup, decent audiences, not huge, right? So hopefully that starts to change and we start to see an impact, but that's an area where we're at the youth level. That could be helped, right? Are we promoting our local soccer broadcast? Are we promoting our local soccer players playing in those games? So I think that's a few things that the local level could help with.
So staying with the local level, before I get to Katryna, coming back to you, I'm going to ask Catherine first. Is there something you can share from what Angel City's FC's done in terms of engaging the grassroots circle soccer community and bringing them into the club, being new, being in the women's, that we can learn from, or?
I don't know if you can learn from it, but I have learned from it. I will say too, in listening, Chris, to what you're saying, this idea of what can grassroots organizations do to either build, to sort of catapult, to make this an inflection point, because it's a massive worldwide event. That very simple thing you mentioned of bringing people together to watch, that's massive. And I say that as somebody who's in the women's game, and that is just now becoming less of a struggle to actually find a place to watch, to find the damn game. And so that little thing, it's an education, it's a community building, it's an affinity building piece that also, by the way, makes you look really cool. I don't say that to be glib. It's a big deal. So finding those moments to bring people together to actually enjoy the game, to create fans of the sport is huge. And I will say that is a piece of what we've done at the grassroots level. And Chris also, said there's a question of whether building this sport, and there are certainly crossovers between Canada and the United States. Having looked at your data, well, the data you presented, Dr. Han, and really feeling like it is the past 3.5 years of my lived experience put into numbers in a beautiful slide deck. It is both top down and ground up. And that is fundamentally the approach that we are taking at Angel City, which is, and this is somewhat different than the men's game, although still amongst sports, certainly in the United States, the MLS, soccer, I don't know whether to call it soccer or football, I'll call it soccer for tonight. Soccer is not the most well-loved, it's not the most watched, it doesn't have the highest, deals in broadcast, but you look at the grassroots level, what's everybody playing? What are all the kids playing? What are those poor parents spending their entire weekends driving their kids to? It's soccer. And so as we look at the women's game, and we're still fighting to pay our players a living wage, frankly, in the NWSL, we're getting closer and closer. It has to be both top down and ground up. So as we fight to pay our players a living wage, fight to pay them in any way that we can, we have to, with the support of partners like BMO, we have to do the work at the grassroots level. And so we have a sponsorship model that is still unique, that I hope will not be unique. I keep crossing my fingers that other people are going to do this. 10% of every sponsor deal that comes in goes directly into community impact. That is why I have a job, because partners like BMO, partners like the one that's on the front of our kit, who I won't mention because they're not here tonight, 10% of those dollars, which by the way are record-breaking dollars, because we said you can't value us against the same metrics as the men's team, we're worth more than what those will tell you. Those dollars go to grassroots programming. And that means with partners like BMO, with our other partners, we are building no-cost and low-cost soccer across the entire county of Los Angeles. Because, and this is my personal mission, is to ensure that girls, women, gender-expansive folks have a relationship with the sport from the moment they have the first chance to kick a ball till my hope is that when I can't walk, I'll still be rolling around kicking a ball. And that starts with making sure people have access. So it is that sponsorship model that I think is at the heart of what enables us to reach that broad audience. But it is fundamentally us saying there are benefits to this sport that go well beyond what is sold by most pay-to-play clubs in the United States, which is your kid is going to go to a D1 school, they're going to get a scholarship. 99.9% of kids are not going to. So what is the benefit, if not that? And so we are here to start building the case for why every kid should have access to that.
It's DoorDash run a kit. I'll give them a shout out since they're league founding partner for Project K as well. Thank you, DoorDash. And sponsorship, I know it's huge, and I'll tell you about the Canadian media landscape later. Spoiler, it's terrible. And sponsorship is huge. It's private investment and it's sponsorship are our main revenue drivers. And the one of the issues in women's sport is because the whole sport industry has been built around men's sport for 100 years, all the sponsor valuation dollars, the banks of the world go to the agencies put it in their calculation to tell them how much the sponsorship is worth. And that is heavily tied to traditional linear broadcast numbers. And women's sport doesn't have that yet, especially a league that doesn't exist yet. So we're having to sell sponsors on we're worth this, but we're not selling to you for this. We're selling to you for this because there's this piece in here that we're just getting enough data about around what our fans are like, the purpose behind the thing. So we are finding the partners more and more who are investing in more than just the sponsorship and are really investing. And I'll give Canadian Tire a shout out. Canadian Tire has been a huge driver in our landscape. They're the one company in Canada, Ally Bank is the one in the US that did it first. Canadian Tire is the one in Canada that said they're gonna achieve 50%. So equal sports sponsorship for men and women, and they're gonna achieve it by 2026. No other companies have done that in Canada yet. And if companies start to do that, it's going to be hundreds of millions of dollars going into women's sport. That'll be trickling down to grassroots in our country as well.
So I'll share just what I think it is that you can sell. It's ROI squared, return on investment, return on impact, right? And that's one of the things that women's sports delivers more than I think men's sports now because they've been around a long time. The impact and the change that women's sport and having professional leagues can do in terms of gender equity in society, period, has much more opportunity and will deliver more. So if you're the right kind of company, which BMO is that kind of thinking company, you put your money in because you're going to get the return on investment. Sure, people are going to come and bank with you, but you're going to have a massive return on impact and making change. And I think that's to me what women's sports offer that, men's sport don't offer at this particular time. So I want to turn to Katryna and say, we've talked a lot about grassroots. This entire audience here, for the most part, is focused on that. And we see that as the driver of the game. We see these events coming. We want to capitalize on them. What, from your perspective, are you thinking about in terms of these events that are coming? But also, what do you need to make them successful at your level? Like what is missing, or what do you need from the events or the partnerships to be able to leverage them for your clubs?
I think resources from leagues or from entities or from companies that are involved are certainly helpful to youth sport organizations. But I think working to capitalize off this opportunity at the grassroots level as well and increasing engagement in your sport in your own communities is a huge opportunity that's happening right now as well. And that comes to, again, professionalizing in your space and basically selling your programming as a product to the businesses in your community to help leverage some of that access and leverage some of that engagement from the community. There's a huge opportunity now, especially with funding, looking even at our governing bodies, and Canada Soccer has been extremely successful in procuring some amazing funding that will help you create accessibility within your communities, for granting streams that help participation events that cover the cost of that and help to engage with that. Those are the kinds of things that are really impactful, and looking at different funding streams that can help do that through the government as well as through different entities, Jumpstart, or I can't think, I'm on the spot, so I can't think off the top of my head, but looking to these organizations as how will Project 8 create opportunities for engagement for girls in communities, and how can we work together to leverage those opportunities? I think if we don't take advantage of something that's happening right now in this game that these big events are providing to us in Canada, we have to stop repeating the same thing and just launch the old way of doing things into the sun. We don't want to talk anymore about how Canada is not in the same space as the rest of the world in soccer, how different countries are more advanced than us. We are advancing. We are a part of this movement, and we are here now, and we have an opportunity that players when they were younger, Diana, when she was playing, when she was younger, and correct me if I'm wrong, did not have the opportunity to look around and think, look at all these women's sports I can go watch. That didn't happen then, and it's happening now. The young girls in our sport will not know a time where women's sport didn't exist. And that's really powerful in what's happening right now. So it's easy to say, yeah, we got a lot of boys registering right now, and that's great. And we need male engagement in the sport, this the same. But to say, hey, we'll just take away these girls' program times so that we can expand this other programming is not going to be the solution in the end. You need to figure out what to do and how to allocate that resourcing to that audience, that female audience, or that minority audience, or the underserved in your community, as well as finding opportunities for the engagement on the male side. But we can't acquiesce anymore. We have to create growth in that space. And I hope as these entities come up, and I know I have no doubt in my mind, and Angel City is obviously doing that, and MLSE and CPL are good partners in that place too, but create opportunities for clubs to engage, for clubs to activate, for clubs to be a part of bigger opportunities. And that helps to create energy in large and small communities and increase that engagement. But if you can provide access, we can provide the interest, no problem.
Awesome. I think an important point for me, hopefully resonated with you for what you just said, is as the excitement grows for 2026, let's not forget first Project 8's coming, then 2026, but the increase in interest in soccer can't be at the expense of one gender versus the other, right? And so when I talked earlier about having a gender lens or a gender equity audit in your organization, do it now at the baseline and figure out how to get it to equality, and then don't back down from it, right? Because if you do, we're not going to be able to support the growth of Project 8 that will come once it's established as a league, and our national women's team and the success they're having, right? We need to keep those opportunities going. That's a little bit of a soapbox for me. So you alluded a bit to it, Diana, and maybe Glenn too. So we hear a lot about the structure of Canada, our geography, the media landscape, as sort of being reasons why professional level soccer maybe struggles a bit, or could be seen as not successful. Flip it around and tell me what you think the strengths are that we have inside Canada that can really support the establishment of Project 8 and the growth for CPL.
Yeah, thank you. Wow, that's a very good question.
It came from the audience. I just paraphrased. So whoever put that in.
Who asked that?
That's a good question.
Who asked that? No. Yeah, it's interesting when our Pacific club plays the Wanderers, you know, they travel about 4,500 kilometers. And, you know, without our great partner at WestJet, little shout out, since we're shouting out sponsors, you know, without them and without their help, we couldn't do it. So I think one of the benefits and one of the things that's very positive about what we do is that we're still young, we're nascent, we're nimble, we can make change. You know, we're not living in this 100-year legacy of this is how it has to be. You know, an incredibly large part of our fan base are new Canadians, or the children are born in Canada. You know, they've moved to Canada, and the children are now in that sort of 20 to 30-year-old age group. Those are the kind of people that are very, very important to us in our market and our fan base. And having access to the new Canadians and the new people that come into the country, your data, our shared data, you know, said 1 in 2 of the new Canadians that comes into this country declares soccer as their favorite sport. Right? With the immigration policies of the country, we're bringing in 500,000 new Canadians for the next 3 years. A little bit of quick math, that's 750,000 brand new soccer fans showing up. And I think that's something that maybe other countries don't have, and we can take advantage of that. You know, they don't say I'm a fan of men's soccer or women's, they're a fan of soccer, right? And they can be a fan of all kinds of soccer. So I think that the last thing I'll say is, I think what everyone's been kind of saying is the accessibility. You know, our product, Diana's product, we're going to be incredibly accessible, right? TFC, they're in the community, they're everywhere. TFC too, like we are incredibly accessible to the communities. And I think that's something that we all have to leverage. And you know, sorry, one last thing is I think our desire to engage social responsibility. I really believe that. If you want to attract a sponsor, and I'm sure you're going through this, and I'm sure you're going through this right now, We lead now. Our first, second, third, fourth, fifth slides are all about social responsibility. You have to walk the talk. You have to be doing it. You have to be authentic with social responsibility. You can't just be talking about it, you know, and just, you know, make an announcement at a couple of matches and say you're doing things responsibly. You have to walk the talk. And I think we can do that, and we can do it better than some others can.
I think we're in good shape. Like, I can't believe, I'm sure you all can't believe how much the game has progressed in our country in the last 10 years. I think soccer, you know, it's not cool anymore in our continent. So we're over that. To Glen's point, we're already the #1 participation sport, and we know that's going to grow because our country's getting more diverse, and because the Men's World Cup is coming, and because we're improving infrastructure every day on the professional side and this side. We know we've got challenges. We're a big country, all those things, but I think too, it's been a hard few years. There's been negative news stories, another few recently, but I hope you are all feeling, because I feel this way, that we are getting towards the end of those things. The labor dispute's got to go away at some point. The men should reach a deal at some point. Like, the men are the problem there. The men need to figure it out. There's a deal on the table. Let's go. I know we had a hiccup with the general secretary. There were so many incredible candidates from what I heard. I know whoever is going to take that role is going to be incredible. And then it's full steam ahead. And I think we have an opportunity as a smaller country to have a more unified vision as we go here over the next few years with the leadership that's coming into Canada Soccer, to have pathways from grassroots all the way up to the top. And honestly, like, we can do that better than some of the global competitors who have been doing it forever. To your point, entrenched systems are never going to change. We're newer. We still get to define what we are. I think we can do it better than the US. They're even bigger population wise. I think we gotta, you know, because they got more people than us on the women's side. So we got to be a little nimbler. We got to compete. But coming in with a new pro league, we have the chance to align our pathways all the way up from grassroots through League One to the pro league. So I feel like we have a ton of huge opportunities now. And our job collectively is to identify the barriers that are existing to access for different groups, to infrastructure, for access infrastructure. I know it comes out from the provinces every day, from clubs on the pro side. Infrastructure is a huge challenge. And the CPL has done an incredible job investing. This World Cup is coming. Is it investing in infrastructure? We see that as a huge thing we can bring to the table. Go after federal funding to put into infrastructure and soccer in this country, because that's a huge barrier for everyone too. So I think if we're collectively going after those barriers and just removing them, we've got the participation, and it's going to keep growing. And right, I don't know, we're not going to be a hockey country forever, you know? We need to fix winter too. Indoor facilities for everyone.
All right, we're gonna end with a rapid fire. It's 2036. It's 10 years post launch of Project 8 and the World Cup, and I'm retiring, just so you know, that year. I think this is my retire year. Quick fire. What does soccer look like in Canada? 10 years. Any perspective?
I just presented to my new board. So in 10 years, we've won a Women's Champions League in North America. One of our pro teams.
Yeah.
Soccer looks like the most accessible and inclusive sport in Canada. Good.
All right.
Yeah, when they think of us as a soccer nation. We're no longer a hockey nation. I think there's more professional. So I think you're going to have 20 teams. We're going to have 20 teams. I think the whole pathway is just going to be explosive. I don't know. I don't think I can say it better than that. We're just going to be thought of, oh, Canada, that's that soccer nation, right?
Awesome.
I think it's working. I got to be a little careful here. We own the Maple Leafs, but here's and we're called Maple Leaf Sports Entertainment. But here's what I will say: my good friend Michael Bartlett is running Basketball Canada, and we talk often about stats. You talk about in New Canadians. There's a time where basketball and soccer are racing each other for that top sport, and we have FIFA World Cup, and we have bigger opportunities, I think, right now in the women's game, specifically here in soccer. So I'll arm wrestle my friend Michael Bartlett and say soccer will be the number one sport. Right.
Awesome.
As the lone non-Canadian, what I will say is Canada will be a soccer nation. Soccer will be the most accessible and inclusive sport in Canada. A women's professional team will have won a Champions League in North America. And the US will be a close second in all of those.
All right, so first I want to say thank you to this audience. You guys have been awesome tonight. Thanks for hanging out with us. We're gonna obviously have some more new notes from Bjorn as to what comes next, but thank you for hanging in. Thanks you for the questions, and join me in thanking this awesome group of people for sharing their time with us tonight.